right, everyone, we are on to the second part of the podcast where we talk about a article or a trend or some kind of piece of news that concerns masculinity in the 21st century. And today, the topic of discussion is men dropping out of college. Why is it happening? Why is it happening? This is a good question, and it's what I'm going to try and answer today. And I've got a bunch of different theories. I'd love to hear what you think. I'm going to just ask you to drop your comments or your disagreements with me in the comments below. So let's get right into it. I'll start with kind of my unique perspective, I guess you would say, on college. So societally, I've always noticed that, it's been kind of a pushed message onto people, specifically in high school, is that like, you've got to go to college, go to college, go to college. And I felt that in my own high school, and I've always been kind of a stubborn ass. So when I was told that, I was like, I'm not going to college. No, thank you. And so I took a gap year after high school where I just saved money. But I do remember at my school, this is a very vivid memory I have of everybody getting up on stage, all my classmates in the senior class, and they were all on this like table wearing their merch from their specific colleges and signing, like, hey, I'm going to University of Dallas. I'm going to the University of Ohio. I'm going to this college or that, all these people would go up and sign for their specific colleges. And I was sitting there in the auditorium thinking, well, this is awkward. Like, I'm like one of the few seniors that is not going to college. And like the vast majority of my class went to college. The vast majority. I mean, there were like 3 kids that didn't go, and I was one of them. And so there was a weird push on a lot of high schoolers, in my opinion, to like, that's the option. This is the only choice you have. Go to college. And so I think that's weird. So I took my gap year, and then I ended up actually going to a college, and I actually learned a lot there. I applied myself very deeply. It was a rare college where they actually ask you to come up with your own conclusions about the source material provided. They don't force specific messages down your throat. I really liked that. It was one of the reasons I valued the college. So I went for 2 years, but at the end of 2 years, I was miserable. Why was I miserable? Because I'm a very visual person. Nowadays, I work remodeling. I work with my hands. I use my body. I take pride in my work. And in remodeling, you're building things. You are making things look prettier. You're taking an old thing and making it into a new, nice thing. So I'm a visual person. And at college, I did not get a lot of that visual gratification. It was all in my brain. And I did learn a lot, and I accrued a lot of knowledge, but I couldn't see the results. And I think because of that, I felt a lack of drive or vision kind of for the future. So that's my story with college. And so, it's a weird thing because I am one of those people that went to college and dropped out. And then a lot of guys are just foregoing college completely. And so I'm going to dive into a couple of reasons I think this might be the case. And but before we do that, I do want to give us some parameters, just a little bit of the article I am talking about so you have a reference and you don't think I'm just pulling this out of my ass. Okay, so according to The Atlantic, American colleges and universities now enroll roughly 6 women for every 4 men. This is the largest female-to-male gender gap in the history of higher education, and it's getting wider. Last year, U.S. colleges enrolled 1.5 million fewer students than 5 years ago, the Wall Street Journal recently reported. So credit to the Wall Street Journal for that. They're the ones who reported the 1.5 million fewer. Apparently, men accounted for more than 70% of the decline. So 70% of that 1.5 million fewer students going to college last year were men. Now, why is this? The first reason I would think of is perhaps men are looking at the job market and saying, if the goal at the end of college is to get a high-paying job, I do not need to go to college. Hot take, this is what I think happened. I think everybody started going to college, right? It's kind of the idea of like, if you're in a group of there's a group of little kids, right? And one of them has a lollipop. All the other kids are like, oh, I'm so jealous. Susie's got a lollipop. And if all the kids have a lollipop, they're all like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is, that's what's happened with degrees. All the kids have degrees, all right? All the people have degrees, and so the degrees have become less valuable. When everybody's got something, it's not really anything, okay? Uh, and so I think that is a big part of what's happened. And I think for a lot of guys, what happened is everyone went to college. They got buttery fingers. They got pudding fingers. They lost the calluses on their hands. And they started to think of manual labor as work beneath them. When personally, I think that for a lot of guys, manual labor gives you a lot of pride in what you do. And it's actually very valuable for a lot of different reasons. But I digress. So a lot of people went to college and they got buttery pudding hands, and they started thinking that manual labor is below them. And they were told throughout this process, if you're going to be a high wage earner or a valuable worker, you have to use your brain, using your body. That is below you. Using your body for manual labor, that's below you. It's a bullshit message. I'm a little biased, I will admit. But what happened was, all these people got these degrees, started thinking that manual labor was below them, and they looked up one day and they said, "Holy shit, who's going to keep our lights on? Who's going to make sure our drains aren't clogged? Who's going to fix my car?" And all these, big people walked up, all these big men walked up and they're like, "Well, I'll do it, but it's going to cost you." Why? Because the labor force is so short in that area nowadays. There's not enough guys to do the work, so they charge out the ass. That's what they do. And it's fair, because everybody decided to say, your job's not valuable. You don't really do a bunch of great work in society. And it's like, no, you are crucial to the greasing of the cogs of the wheel in society. You make this thing spin around. That's why we've got lights. That's why I've got lights on me right now. Is there are people somewhere helping create electricity for the house, right? And so I think a lot of guys looked at that and said, okay, I can go make $100,000 as a journeyman electrician or a journeyman plumber, and I can get paid while I learn. I won't get paid that $100,000, but I'll get paid as I learn, still a considerable sum. And then I'll learn, I'll get my license, and I can provide for a family. I can help other people. And I didn't spend 4 years going to a college where I would have been miserable. I wouldn't have learned a ton. And what I would have learned have been a lot of garbage. I think a lot of guys too look at the degrees and say, these prerequisites have nothing to do with the degree I'm aiming to achieve. I'm going in for construction management, and you're telling me that I have to learn this ballerina class. I mean, that's an extreme example, but this art history class. It's like, I don't know if it really applies. And in my opinion, it's a big money grab by colleges, and I think it's pretty stupid. And I think a lot of guys looked at that and said, okay, I'm not going to go do that. It's going to be a hell of a lot of money, a hell of a lot of time, where I'm really not making great money. I'm basically just spending money away. Or I could go right into a job, start making money, start to accrue my licenses, and then boom, I'm in the workforce, very well-functioning citizen, making lots of money because other people aren't willing to do my work. So I think for a lot of guys, that's what happened. And for another subset of guys, I'll read this stat. So only 27.3% of college graduates work in the field of study associated with their degree, right? So that means 3 out of 4 people are not doing what they originally thought they were going to be doing with their degree. That's not a great success rate. Now, a lot of companies these days are just looking for a 4-year degree. Why is that? In my opinion, it's because they hope that after 4 years, a person would have a general sense of how to write, how to communicate, and how to speak well. Fair enough, that may be the case. And they also may think that after getting through 4 years of higher education, one must be a hard worker and dedicated to your craft. I will tell you right now, there are a lot of people who go through 4 years of college and come out the other end and are not good workers, are not hard workers, not what a company is looking for. right? And they may have the degree, they've got the shiny piece of paper, but they're not, a lot of them aren't even great communicators, because a lot of colleges, their programs are really crappy. Like a great writing program, you should be a proficient writer at the end of 4 years of college. You should be a proficient communicator at the end of 4 years of college. And that's what a good college should do for you. And fair enough. But a lot of colleges don't do that. A lot of colleges are crappy, and they're not actually going to give you that skill set that you need to actually perform these really high functioning tasks in corporations, in businesses, and things like that. So I digress, but a lot of people get degrees that they don't ever use. And I think there's a lot of misfounded trust in what a person out of college is going to be. Now, sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it's the case that they are really hard workers and they're very eloquent, and they're also very, very good at writing, and they're good at all these math, whatever, if you're going to be an accountant, all these things. That could be the case. But for a lot of people, it's not. And I think a lot of guys looked at that and said, no, thank you. I'm out. And actually, thankfully, I will say, I believe a lot of that is changing. I think a lot of companies, because of the lack of strength of the workforce, are saying, hey, actually, if you just go, for 3 months and work on getting this certificate of this certification, we'll definitely consider you, and a lot of companies are doing that, and they're broadening their horizon of who they will let in, because they need to have, obviously, some barrier to entry, because you don't want someone who's going to trash your business and do a terrible job to come in there. But I don't think the answer nowadays is a 4-year college degree. I think there are other ways to attain that knowledge, to attain that expertise that will allow you to be a great worker for said company or, whatever place you're working for. So there is that. And then lastly, on a broader note, I think a lot of guys are not going to college or aren't even attempting to go after the trades because they are aimless and they don't have a direction for their life. If I saw a path that, I didn't know where it was going, and there's a good chance that it just went on forever and there was no end, I probably wouldn't take it. I need to be able to, you got to be able to see that there is a goal at the end of the path. There has to be direction to your life. And I think a lot of men don't have that. And so they avoid college, they avoid work in general because they don't have anything to work for. And I think a lot of that comes down to the breaking down of institutions that historically have given men a lot of meaning and worth, and it has allowed society to tell them that they actually hold an important place, as a father, as a husband, as part of a tight-knit family unit, that you have a lot of value as a man in that place. But nowadays, a lot of those institutions have been eroded, and so when you're told that if you go to the institution, you're going to be unhappy, and that the institution is faltering and is terrible, so don't go after it. But that leaves a lot of men sidelined to where they look at it and they say, well, what the hell am I supposed to do with my life? That used to be the thing that guys did, and now it's not. So what do I do? And so I think that's a big reason that a lot of guys are saying no to college, but also no to work in general. And that's a problem, and that needs to be fixed. And that's what a lot of this podcast is about, is trying to remind men that they are important to society, that they are supposed to strive for greatness, that they're called to be more than what society tells them they're capable of, and that there's a lot of meaning and value and hope in that. And so this concludes the second section of this podcast, talking about why men are avoiding college or dropping out like this guy.